if you are constantly annoying people around you because you're always seeking approval, you're always needing affirmation. Little kids do that. They need it. They need that kind of thing from us. But as adults, we kind of need to temper that a little bit. Dad, how'd I do? How'd I do? What'd you think? Da da da. Was it good? Was it good? Was it the best I've ever done? You're going to hear that from your kids. But when you, as an adult, are carrying on these same characteristics and doing the same things, people are going to see that in a different way, because it's obviously showing that there's some dysfunction somewhere in how you see yourself and what you need to feel better.
Welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It. Today, we're going to be discussing what to say when I'm feeling down on myself, when I'm discouraged. We have a relationship with ourselves, and most of us don't even know that, but we're constantly talking to ourselves and creating that relationship with ourselves. And there's some really important things about that, because whatever we're doing inside of us is going to spill out onto other people. And so the Lord is, he gets in there. He tells us what to think about even. And so today we're with Kyle Hargrove, our favorite licensed professional counselor. And we're going to be talking through what to say and how it affects our relationships. And, Kyle, where do you want to start with this today?
Well, I want to start with this by admitting that I'm scared to death about this podcast today, because we're talking about what we say to ourselves when we're down on ourselves and so forth. And I don't know if I could say those words on this.
I know, right? Like super vulnerable.
Sometimes I have some real doozies for myself when I get frustrated, and I say some things to myself sometimes that upon later review, I'm thinking, is that really what I think of me? Mm-hmm. Is what comes out of my mouth in that moment of frustration, is it 100% the way that I look at myself? Because I hope not. But I am sure that in large part, there is some truth in the words that I speak in my inner dialogue. And anybody that says they don't talk to themselves because they think you're going to think they're crazy. To me, if you don't talk to yourself, that means you don't think.
Right.
Because we don't think in colors and we don't think in texture, we think in words, just like we speak and just like we hear. And so, yeah, you do talk to yourself. Admit it. Go ahead, just go like this. The up and down. That's the nod, not the shake.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really an important topic, because that self is the identity that we have. We carry our identity into every relationship that we have. And just for our listeners, as we start getting into this, if you want more information around this stuff, go to greaterimpact.org and download our little PDF that talks about how you don't have to walk on eggshells and how to save your marriage, how to interact differently. It really all starts with identity. We one thing that comes to mind for me is a number of years ago, Jim and I were in a rough spot in our marriage, and I was making marinara in the kitchen, and he was doing something. He was cooking something, and I got a text from a guy that does some horse training that I was signed up for, and we're working through the schedule and stuff. And there was a comment made about that, and I was really angry. Like, my husband perceived something there that wasn't true. And I lost my ever-loving mind over it. But I didn't say anything, right? But I got in the car and I drove to the grocery store because I was low on onions for my marinara. And all the way to the store, I'm thinking, I can't believe that he thinks that about me. I can't believe he doesn't trust me with this. Oh my gosh, like how, all that stuff. And then I'm like, how is it? What am I doing wrong? Like, am I really this bad at relationship that, somebody that I love this much would think that about me? Like, and then I'm thinking, well, you're not really as pretty as so-and-so, and you're not, you're a little bit heavy right now. And I was, and, you're not putting energy, and so then the here's everything that's wrong with you, and your butt's too flat. You've got the runner's butt, but yeah, there's nothing there. Like, I am going to town on everything about me. And I got to the store, and by the time I got to the store, and it's only 4 minutes from my house, like 4 minutes, but I was miserable. I was deep in despair and discouragement. And I felt completely worthless. Like, oh, why is anybody married to me ever? Like, I can't even believe that we got married. Like, why? And yeah, I'm probably going to lose him. It was just ugly. I am not worth a good husband, just all this. And so then what's cool is somehow the voice of the Lord got louder than all that garbage. And I started using our process that we teach in our classes called the steps. And I'm like, what is this? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? And Lord, will you comfort me? Because I feel like a big zero right now.
Wow.
And he did. He brought his comfort, and he brought the word to me. He reminded me that I was perfectly and wonderfully made, that I was precious. Just verses were coming to me. And it was amazing. And I felt loved and I felt comforted in that moment. And then I realized that all the things I was saying about myself to myself was sin. There were lies. I'm not worthy. I'm this terrible person. I can't believe all that lies. And yet I was believing them. And I realized, because I was in alignment with that was sin. And so, I asked God, what do I do with this? And he's like, believe me, repent, turn away from that. So I got my onions, I get back in the car, and I get home, and I'm like, okay, so, we had a little exchange. You want to talk about that? And he said, honey, that was really my stuff. We haven't, we've been traveling a lot. We spent a bunch of time with my mom while she was sick. We've had a lot of stress in the relationship. I just miss you. And, that was really, I didn't mean what I said, and I'm so sorry. And I said, oh my goodness, thank you so much. And I miss you too. Like, so then we have this really beautiful connecting conversation, instead of, I could totally see myself like 10 years before this happened, 15 years before. If that had happened, I would have said, I can't believe you don't trust me. I can't believe you, think this. I would have come up with something horrible to fire back, right?
About things that were not even said.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was in my head. That was where that was real. And I didn't do it. But I did listen to the garbage, and then stopped and repented, went a different way. But I'll tell you what, that voice hasn't left my head fully. Like, she shows up now and then.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, what you did is you got on the Wonkily mobile.
The what?
The Wonkmobile. When your thoughts get wonkily,
Okay,
it takes you on a trip, and you have to jump on the Wonkmobile.
okay.
And when you get on the Wonkmobile, you go very, very dark places. I've had, I can't tell you how many comments I've heard people tell me before about going inside of here when they're not in a good place. Now, I know with the guys that are working on on overcoming their addictions, they say the mind is a dark neighborhood after dark. It's a scary neighborhood after dark. Don't go there alone. Make sure that if you're going to talk about things that are difficult, that you're talking with somebody who can speak truth to you, instead of to perpetuate the lies and the things that go on. I heard somebody the other day say that his brain was not a very good roommate.
Oh.
that was on right there, because I can identify with that. Sometimes my brain is a terrible roommate.
I love that. That is hilarious. We had a meeting last week with some attorneys about some stuff, and most of the work we do is business casual, but it's attorneys. So I'm looking through trying to find a suit, and I'm going, okay, no, that's not going to look good on you. And no, I don't like this either. And then I literally said aloud to myself, Nina, why are you talking to yourself like this? You have beautiful clothes. Pick something out. Stop making this a big deal, and just get dressed and go. Like, it doesn't matter what you wear. And I'm like, okay, self, that's good advice. Thank you. And I'm doing this aloud in my closet, but it helped. And so therefore,
yeah, we're glad there aren't cameras following us around all the time, like on reality television. Because, but see, when you pulled into Frustration Station there on the Wonkmobile, and it always makes the same sound when you get there. It goes wonk, 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 wonk. Like that. So yeah, there's that. So anyhow,
God place.
What we're talking about today is our self-image. We're talking about the picture and the view that we have of ourselves. And man, I mean, there's many parts of that as there are compartments of the personality. And our self-image, it can be pretty healthy in some areas of our life and kind of poor in other areas. It can be really good in all the areas, or it can be really bad in all the areas. The truth of the matter is, and I think what we want to identify today is that poor self-image typically translates into how I treat other people,
Mhm.
how I deal with them, and how I treat people in the relationships that I have with them, whether they're collegial, professional relationships, or whether they're my most intimate relationship with my partner, my wife, you, your husband. But a lot of emotional projecting goes on when we're feeling badly about ourselves. And you know what? There's a reason for it. And I like to see things in images and pictures and maybe short videos in my head. I sure could never make one, but I see them anyway. And I call this emotional casting. It's like a fisherman, and I have my rod and reel there, and I'm casting it. But the critical part is not what I have in my hand, or how good it is, or if it's a cane pole or a $400 reel. It's what's on the other end of the line. What am I using for bait? And this emotional casting is kind of taking a part of ourselves. It's like picking a fly off your shirt or your vest, and putting it on. I'm taking a part of my own self-image and I'm putting it on there, and I'm chunking it out there as bait. So what am I going to catch? I'm going to catch somebody who thinks like I do and who's going to agree and identify with me in all those negative ways, and tell me what a victim I am and how poorly I've been treated, and that I deserve better, and that I deserve to be happy, and all those types of things. Or I'm going to catch someone who's going to say, you thought what? You think what? Have you lost your ever loving mind? And then we're going to have a good argument, because I still get to get my stuff out when I have an argument. So emotional casting, I don't necessarily know what I'm going to catch. I may have a pretty good idea, but it turns out in real life to be how I converse and communicate and treat the people that I have around me. Because if they agree with me, we're going to get along. If they don't, we're going to fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of this comes from a broken identity, a low sense of self, even to the point of self-hatred. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, we call it self-hatred. We call it self-loathing. And it goes back. I mean, this is the difficult part of therapy, when we're doing, therapy with people who have this self-image. And as we track backwards, we figure out it's not something that they came up with on their own. Mm-hmm. It's based on things that were said to them when they were children. It's based on events that occurred that might have been somewhat traumatic in their families or in their lives. And people said things about those events, that this is what happens to certain kind of people, and we believe that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then if something similar happens to us later, we go, oh my gosh, I must be that kind of person. I must be the person with the third eye in the middle of my forehead, because that's what my second grade teacher said. This is what happens to children with three eyes on their forehead. Yeah. And I believe that. And then I begin literally flogging myself by the things I say to myself and the way that I behave and the way that I look at the world. This can come from things like, if you hear yourself saying these, you might consider yourself, in a danger zone. Okay. Stuff like that. You'll never succeed no matter how hard you try. Doesn't matter what you do. This is your deal. This is your life, and you're going to have to live it. You'll never succeed in it. You're going to mess this up just like you've messed up everything else in your life. Those are, why would a person like that love you? Okay. They must have some kind of ulterior motive if that's the case, because you're not that lovable, at least for someone like that. You can't trust anyone. They'll always let you down. Mm-hmm. Don't put your trust in other people. Don't trust people. Well, you're limited in your choices if you can't trust the people in your life. You got the highest of the high to trust, or the lowest of the low. You can trust God, or you're going to trust your dog. Mm-hmm. If you take people out of the equation, you've pretty much limited your choices to that.
Right. And so much of this too, I mean, people say terrible things to kids and adults, even, then it comes out of their own wounding, right? Like it's this progressive thing, but there's also the voice of Satan in this, not all the thoughts that we have are our own. And so we can have a normal event And then he can say something like, nobody's paying attention to you. You're not wanted here. Everybody's having a good time but you, but because you're not right, there's something wrong with you. That you could be the most perfect parent and have beautiful parenting moments, and the enemy can plant stuff in your kids' heads. And that's happened to us also.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's fear. That's just good old fashioned, plain old fear. Fear is the primary driver of self-image. I'm not blank enough. Fill in the blank.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not talented enough. I'm not athletic enough. These are things that they take up residence inside our heart. And when they do, they're hard to get out, and it's virtually impossible for us, to get those things out on our own. So because it becomes such a habitual way of living and seeing the world.
So what do you recommend to people to deal with this?
Oh, well, I think if we have, real specific of areas of insecurity that we're aware of or that have been brought to our attention, the ways that we don't like ourselves and so forth, and ways we'd like to improve ourselves, we've got to determine that it's worth the time and the effort to spend time developing the character or the characteristic, whichever it may be, because it's not going to happen on its own. If it was going to happen on its own, it would have already happened. Mm-hmm. If it could happen just because of desire, just because of want, well, I've wanted to be different than this my entire life, but it just hasn't happened. No? There's a reason for that.
Yeah. Well, maybe the lie is I'm always going to be this way, or I'm never going to be able to XYZ. And so, people need help getting out of that place. We do healing prayer stuff to, help them with that, but therapy also works because a lot of that's trauma related.
Exactly. To the believer, this just came into my head after we actually began this broadcast. I am crucified with Christ. Therefore, I no longer live, but it is Christ who lives in me. Okay. And that was, what a powerful piece of information to have and of encouragement to say, okay, if I am truly crucified with Christ, if I am truly his, then it's him that lives through me. And I don't like what this looks like. I can't believe that what I'm seeing in my own life would represent something that Christ would portray.
Well, and in those spaces where we're not him, there's a piece of our identity that's broken.
Yes.
And so we need to address that. And we see this with couples, they just can't be kind and gentle in the way they disagree. That's so common. Why is that? Well, there's something broken in both of them in their identity because they're missing what you just said, Christ in me.
Yeah. And if we're truly focused on Christ being in us, I think that it takes over. Maybe it's a gradual thing. Maybe it's I need to have several instances to prove it to me so that I don't think this anymore. Opportunities to see that the lies that I think about myself and that I act on because I believe them to be true get dispelled.
Yeah.
And I think if I ask God to do that, and I am truly open to seeing and not pre-writing the script saying, well, I didn't hear what I thought I was going to hear. So I guess, well, maybe I totally missed it because I was focused in on what I thought I was going to get from God, and it's not what I got.
Yeah.
So I think it's better for us, in ways that we can control, in the opportunity to seek out professional help, to have conversations with people that we respect and trust. Not talking about this is going to pretty much ensure that it stays the same or gets worse.
Yeah.
That much I can tell you.
That is what's true. It just promulgates more of the same. And you can't keep shoving it under the rug because it keeps coming out.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it negatively impacts all of our relationships. I'm a big fan of therapy. And I love the fact that there's more men in our culture these days seeking out help. There was this stigma attached to getting any kind of help around any kind of psychological thinking, thing. And I don't think that exists anymore. We're so much more open. At least the majority of the people I'm working with, they're fully open to going to therapy when there's space beyond what we can do. Because I'm a coach, I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more openness, I think. We've shortchanged men in our culture. We've expected them to behave a certain way. And the reality is they have the same kind of feelings women do. Women don't we don't have the corner on the market of mental stress and anxiety and depression. I'm sorry, no. More men commit suicide than women do.
Yes.
That's tragic. And why do you think they do that? Because they're not getting help. Well, now they can. And that stigma is moving away. And I love it because I love men. I gave birth to 2 of them. And, my daughter's dating one. I married one. I mean, I think these guys have not been treated well in our culture and expected to behave in ways that would be only expected of people that are fully healed. And it's like, nobody's like that.
Yeah.
Like nobody, it's not fair. So I love that people are getting help.
Lots of ways to get help.
Absolutely. Well, anything you want to leave our listeners with today before we wrap up?
Oh, are we wrapping up?
I don't know.
Let's talk for a minute about just some of the things that I would like for people, and I don't want to leave on a negative note. So we have to find one more positive note after I share these things.
Oh no. Okay.
But, if you don't do this well, if you are suffering from a low self-esteem or a poor image of yourself, and I'm speaking pretty much to character, because that's usually where we beat ourselves up the most. Mm-hmm. Okay, is that I see character in other people and I wish I had the kind they had. But I don't. Woe is me. What am I going to do? But the likelihood is, and this is, I think, the point of what we wanted to talk about today. If you are this way, you will literally wear out the people that are important to you and the people that you love. Okay, where you're wanting to bring something good to their life, instead, you're wearing them out. Man, it's exhausting being with a person who's the world, for whom the world they see is negative and cynical.
Yeah.
It's very tiring. So I had a list of kind of signs of self-loathing and self-hatred,
Okay.
If you hate things about yourself. So let's look at them. We call this absolute thinking, or I call it all or nothing. It's everything or nothing. And we find this actually in our vocabulary. We find it when we get at odds with our spouse and say, you always do this or say that. Yep. You never pick up for, stand up for me. And that's not true. Okay. Most of the time that's a lie. And people who get into using absolutes a lot have trouble believing themselves. They have to make sure that whatever they cast on that other person makes them feel better about themselves.
Yeah.
And that is not good in a relationship.
Right.
If you're somebody who has a pessimistic or a cynical outlook in general, that is exhausting for the people around you. Okay. Nobody wants to be around the person whose glass is not just half empty. I mean, it's barely got anything in it. It would not be a satisfying drink of water.
Well, it might be the wrong size glass even.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you are constantly annoying people around you because you're always seeking approval, you're always needing affirmation. Little kids do that. They need it. They need that kind of thing from us. But as adults, we kind of need to temper that a little bit. Dad, how'd I do? How'd I do? What'd you think? Was it good? Was it good? Was it the best I've ever done? You're going to hear that from your kids. But when you as an adult are carrying on these same characteristics and doing the same things, people are going to see that in a different way, because it's obviously showing that there's some dysfunction somewhere in how you see yourself and what you need to feel better.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a needy trait, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Not attractive. Clingy, needy.
People start getting that way about us. If you're constantly envious of others and or their success, That's something that's going to be a real trait of being very unhappy with yourself. If your feelings are facts, period. In other words, if you take that, our perception is our reality statement, and just take it to the wall,
Mm-hmm.
say, whatever I perceive is the way it is, and there's nobody that can convince me differently. Okay. We got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because emotions aren't facts. Feelings, beliefs, thoughts, those are not facts, not necessarily. And we find that when our self-image is poor, most of the things we believe to be fact are actually not true. They're lies.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you project that onto other people, it is exhausting, especially if what you believe about them is not true.
Yeah.
You know, people can't hang out with that very long. It's difficult.
Yeah. And then the last one I have is, if you take criticism or feedback personally, and I've suffered from this my entire life. Okay. Someone says something to me about something, and it's like what you talked about a while ago in your story about you and your husband. He said something and you made it into everything.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Oh, and someone will say something to me about something that needs improvement or could use some work or whatever. And I just can't let it go. I will take it to the nth degree, and they'll be thinking things about me that they never even knew they thought about me. Why? Mm-hmm. Because they didn't.
Yeah.
All lies.
Well, and you don't do that with everything, and neither do I. I mean, because of the work we do, we've had to grow up ourselves, mature in some major spaces. It's, oh my goodness, it's difficult. Yeah. Worth doing though.
It is. So before we stop today, let's talk about a little bit of, self-checks. How do we know? How do what if I'm not sure? Maybe I have some negative stuff floating out there, but I don't know how bad it is. I don't, it's been my best friend my whole life. I really don't know if I even want to get rid of it. But, one of the things that we look for in this situation is congruency. Is what I'm feeling and thinking on the inside, is it matched with how I behave on the outside? Or am I having to put on all the time? Am I having to be in a production all the time, learning lines and playing parts, because I can't really let what's going on the inside come out? Wow. So if you've got that thing going on and there's this lack of congruency, then that's something that might warrant, a visit to a therapist.
Yeah, that whole thought process of, oh, I have to be cheerful now. Mm-hmm. That if that's occurring at all, it's like, wait a minute, like that's not who you are. Like that's not the Holy Spirit. And I the only reason I know that is because I've done that, when you're in despair, discouraged or whatever, when you're thinking those things, it is an act, it is a thing you put on, but it's not useful and it's not healthy. And so seeing a therapist is definitely a huge thing to be looking at in that space.
Another thing is and this goes to the issue of setting healthy boundaries. If we're this approval seeking person because we feel so badly about ourselves, we need others to tell us good things. What that typically means is our boundaries are very porous.
Yeah.
Okay. Or they're like you've seen the orange plastic construction fence, along the sidewalk that doesn't keep anybody from going anywhere. It just is a suggestion. Don't go in here. Okay. Well, anything can get through there.
Right.
And that's what our boundaries are like. When we're approval seeking, they're way too porous. And we let people in places that we shouldn't, and then we get upset about it. It's like praying for rain and then getting upset when it thunders, or creating the storm and being angry because you got wet.
Yeah. And how often do we not have boundaries with ourselves? And that, I mean, we're the worst thing in the universe to lead. That, if we're leading other people, that's way easier than leading ourselves. And we give in to ourselves, or do we not give in? Do we have standards? Do we have boundaries for ourselves? And, the Bible is the place to start with that. Like, can we follow God in these places?
Yeah. Well, the truth is, and this is my final answer.
Okay.
There are probably more people out there than any of us can possibly realize that can identify with our feelings of self-loathing, either personally or professionally. So when all is said and done, it's going to take more than you to find your value in God's economy. Where do I fit in this place of called life? Where I've lived it my whole life. I've done everything I'm supposed to do, but I don't feel like I have a place. I don't fit in. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. Now there's somebody that can hear that and help you with it. So how hard, really the question, how hard would it be for you to reach out to a person that you respect, and maybe trust, and be transparent for once about what you're feeling on the inside. Just let it all out, no matter how ugly or how caustic it may feel or sound to you, to hear those things coming out of yourself, because none of us want to be that way. We don't like ourselves at all when we are. So we weren't born that way. We weren't born unlucky. It's just not, nothing good ever happens to me. And we start prognosticating things that probably won't happen to us. And guess what? They probably won't, because we ensure that.
Yeah. Self-fulfilling prophecy, predicting a negative future.
So unloading this stuff onto somebody that loves you enough to listen and hear it.
Yeah.
It's just a start, but it's a really good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you have no one, because there are people, a lot of people that don't have a relationship like that, where they can trust somebody at that level, then you know what? Pull out your phone book, look in your health insurance, because it is federal law. Your company has to provide you with health insurance that covers mental health resources. But reach out, get help with this. You don't have to feel the way that you feel.
Exactly.
So thank you, Kyle. This was really informative today, and came at it from some different angles, things that we haven't talked about before. So really appreciate that. And guys listening here, check out some other episodes. Might help you resolve some conflict in your primary, most important relationships. Thanks for tuning in.